Today, we're going to talk about the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. Now, picture yourself in late March of 1968. And there is a strike going on in Memphis, Tennessee.
I'm listening to it.
No, you got to get rid of that.
I'll get it.
My ADHD is just going, bah. Okay? So in late March of 1968, there was a strike in Memphis, Tennessee. And black sanitation workers, which is a politically correct name for garbage, guys who works on a garbage truck, they were having a strike because they didn't feel like the conditions and pay was equitable. So in late March 1968, in Memphis, Tennessee, a strike was taking place by black sanitation workers because they were demanding better pay and better working conditions. So who do you think travels to the city of Memphis to help these folks out in their endeavor? Martin Luther King Jr. So, in late March of 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. travels to the city of Memphis, Tennessee, and the purpose of his visit was to support a strike by black sanitation workers, and these workers had been actually on strike since February and were demanding better pay and better working conditions. He gave a speech while he was there at the Masonic Temple in Memphis, and the speech was a little strange, especially with what happens afterwards. He gave the speech at the Masonic Temple. Anybody know what the Masonic Temple is?
Can you spell it?
Masons? Masons, yeah. M-A-S. Oh, that's right. I got her. Tell us what the Masons are, would you please? Burke?
Well, it's kind of like isn't it kind of like just a political action group?
It's kind of a, it's a kind of,
It's an older,
it's kind of a fraternity, so to speak. Not a college fraternity, but a fraternity of men, and now women. It was first men. That it's kind of religious based in a way, but it's the Masons, the Freemasons, and people believe in that, and it's not uncommon. You know where the special ed office is now by Eastside? That's the former Masonic Temple in Warren when they had a big group of Masons. Okay. Now, in his speech, and I just want you to listen. Tell me what you think might be kind of interesting about this speech. This is part of his speech. He said in his speech, "Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place, but I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will, and He has allowed me to go up to the mountain, and I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I might not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. My eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord." That was the end of his speech. So what does that say? Well, he's worried. He's at least got on his mind that he may not live through this movement. First time he ever gave a speech to show his mortality, so to speak. You know what I mean? Well, that would be the last speech that Dr. King would ever make. On the afternoon of April 4th, 1968, Martin Luther King and his followers were staying at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis in room 306. He was in room 306. So Martin Luther King is staying at the Lorraine Motel in room 306, the afternoon of April 4th, 1968. And it's a kind of an old-fashioned motel. It's not exactly the Hilton. And have you ever seen, we actually have one in Worland kind of behind the old JM Sports where they have a bottom row and then they have a top row and they have kind of a balcony that you can walk out on. Okay, it's very similar to that. Well, That afternoon, Dr. King stepped outside on the balcony to get some fresh air. He's kind of tired of being cooped up in his room, so he steps out on the balcony to get some fresh air. And he noticed from the balcony some friends down in the parking lot, and he just leaned over the balcony and started to speak to his friends that were down below on ground level. So the afternoon of April 4th, 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. stepped outside on the balcony of room 306 at the Lorraine Hotel to get some fresh air. As he stood on the balcony, he noticed some friends below and began to speak to them. Well, suddenly at 5:30 p.m., a single shot rang out in the Memphis sky. Suddenly at 5:30 p.m., a single shot rang out. The bullet hit Dr. King in the neck and completely tore away the right side of his jaw. So Dr. King was shot in the neck and the bullet tore away the right side of his jaw. He was attended to right away by his supporters, and he was rushed to St. Joseph's Hospital as doctors desperately tried to save his life. So he had not perished from the gunshot wound. He was taken to St. Joseph's Hospital in Memphis, where doctors desperately tried to save his life. So he was shot in the neck and the bullet tore away the right side of his jaw. He was rushed to St. Joseph's Hospital as doctors desperately tried to save his life. Unfortunately, at 7:05 p.m., he was pronounced dead at the age of 39. So at 7:05 p.m. that evening, a little over an hour and a half after he was shot, he was pronounced dead at the age of 39. What did Dr. King's death set off across the country? Rioting in major cities, most notably Chicago and Washington, D.C. So Dr. King's death set off urban rioting and violence in 40 cities across the country, most notably in Chicago and Washington, D.C. Robert Kennedy, who we'll get into that later, who was running for the presidency, was campaigning for the presidency in Indianapolis, Indiana. And he's there campaigning, and he hears the news of Martin Luther King's assassination. And there is no rioting going on in Indianapolis because why? They don't know about it yet. So when Robert Kennedy finds out about this, he is the one that breaks the news of the assassination to the crowd that he was addressing. And this is his speech, and I want you to follow through with me. Think about what he's saying here. So, yes?
Where is he at, campus?
Indianapolis, Indiana. And somebody whispers to him about what has happened, and he interrupts his speech, and this is what he says. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm only going to talk to you just a minute or so this evening because I have some very sad news for all of you. Could you lower those signs, please? Because there were people that were holding up, RFK signs. I have some very sad news for all of you, and I think sad news for all of our fellow citizens and people who love peace all over the world. And that is that Martin Luther King was shot and killed tonight in Memphis, Tennessee. And you can imagine the gasp that went out among the crowd. Martin Luther King dedicated his life to love and to justice between fellow human beings. He died in the cause of that effort. In this difficult day, in this difficult time for the United States, it's perhaps well to ask what kind of a nation we are and what direction we want to move in. For those of you who are black, considering the evidence evidently is that there were white people who were responsible, you can be filled with bitterness and with hatred and a desire for revenge. We can move in that direction as a country, in greater polarization, black people amongst blacks and whites amongst whites, filled with hatred towards one another, or we can make an effort, as Martin Luther King did, to understand and to comprehend and to replace that violence, that stain of bloodshed that has spread across, I should say, our land, with an effort to understand compassion and love. For those of you who are black and are tempted to fill with or be filled with hatred and mistrust of the injustice of such an act against all white people, I would only say that I can also feel in my own heart the same kind of feeling. I had a member of my family killed, but he was killed by a white man. But we have to understand, but we have to make an effort in the United States. We have to make an effort to understand, to get beyond those rather difficult times. So I ask you tonight to return home, to say a prayer for the family of Martin Luther King. Yeah, it's true, but more importantly, to say a prayer for our own country, which all of us love, a prayer for understanding and the compassion of which I spoke. What's the remarkable thing about that? He had no preparation. He just made this speech off the cuff. Isn't that incredible? I mean, one of his greatest speeches ever. But he basically did what with that effort? Yeah. And was there a riot in Indianapolis? No. Okay. Now back in Memphis, however, 4,000 National Guardsmen were sent to Memphis to back up police, and they enforced a dusk to dawn curfew to curb the violence. So back in Memphis, 4,000 National Guard troops were sent to the city to back up police and enforce what they called a dusk to dawn curfew. What's that mean?
It's nighttime.
Nobody's out, basically. Dusk to dawn. So from the time it even starts to get dark until dawn, nobody's out. Okay? Who else you think gave a speech about this when he found out? LBJ. President Johnson gave a speech back in Washington, D.C., and he basically stated a lot of things, but the thing that came out, he said, I ask every citizen to reject the blind violence that has struck Dr. King. Okay, you don't have to write that down, but I'll repeat it. I ask every citizen to reject the blind violence that has struck Dr. King. Now, police launched one of the biggest manhunts in American history. And they offer a $100,000 reward for information leading to the capture and conviction of King's assassin. Did they do that with the president? Can't President Kennedy? No. So this is getting to be something we've got to get a curb on. We've had a political assassination of a president, and within 5 years now, the most notable civil rights leader in our country has been assassinated. And we're not done yet, by the way. But anyway, so police launched one of the biggest manhunts in American history, and a $100,000 reward was offered for information that led to the capture and conviction of whoever shot Dr. Martin Luther King. Okay? Any questions? In that short of a time, Dr. Martin Luther King joins President John F. Kennedy as a martyr to his cause.
How much was the reward?
$100,000. So in 1968, that would be $500,000 at least. Okay, that'll take us to our next subtopic then, which is a profile on Dr. King. Now, some of you that were here Thursday, we showed a video, and you'll see the rest of it at the end of this week, and it told a little bit about this, so this might be new information for some of you, but some of you might remember this from the video. A profile on Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
How is he doctor?
We'll tell you that. That's a good question. He has a doctorate in theology. That's what, you know what theology is? Okay. Martin Luther King Jr. was born on January 15th, 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia. Dr. King was born on January 15th, 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia. He had an older sister and a younger brother. So he was born on January 15th, 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia. He had an older sister and a younger brother. Both King's father and his grandfather were Baptist ministers. Both Dr. King's father and his grandfather were Baptist ministers. And ironically, they were ministers at the same church, the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, which is on your ID sheet. So both Martin Luther King's father and his grandfather were Baptist ministers, and both served the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta. So he had a calling, kind of, didn't he? Dr. King was a very bright young man. He did so well in high school that he skipped his freshman and his senior year. He only went to high school 2 years. And at the age of 15, he entered Morehouse College in Atlanta. So he did so well in high school that he only went his sophomore and junior year. He skipped his freshman and senior year, and at the age of 15, he entered Morehouse College in Atlanta. What type of college do you think that was?
All black.
All black, thank you. He graduated from Morehouse College in 1948, and he entered the graduate program at Boston University. So he graduated from Morehouse College in 1948, and then enrolled in the graduate program at Boston University. Yep. He graduated from graduated from Morehouse College in 1948, and immediately after his graduation from Morehouse, he entered the graduate program at Boston University. Now, during graduate school in 1953, he met and married Coretta Scott. Here she is right here. Signatures are hard to see, but it's there. And they had 4 children. So in 1953, during graduate school, he met and married Coretta Scott, and the couple had 4 children. You don't have to write this down, but they had Yolanda, Martin Luther King III, Dexter, and Bernice. So 2 boys and 2 girls. Answering Shayna's question, in 1955, Dr. King earned his doctorate degree in theology from Boston University. Theology is religion, and became what? A pastor, yeah. So, in 1955, Dr. King earned a doctorate degree in theology from Boston University. And at age 26, guess where he went to be the pastor? He went back to Montgomery, Alabama, he went to Montgomery, Alabama, and became pastor of the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. Dexter, just like it sounds. So at the age of 26, Dr. King becomes the pastor of Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. This decision to go there and go to Montgomery set the stage for him becoming a leading civil rights leader in America. It happened kind of in a way by chance. Okay, so it's 1955, and he's just got a career as a pastor at the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. He's going to be a pastor. Probably a low-key job, will never become too famous. But something happens on December 1st, 1955 in Montgomery that sets the stage for Martin Luther King's crusade that'll last until his death. Anybody want to guess what happened on December 1st, 1955 in Montgomery, Alabama?
Is that the bomb that went off?
What? Rosa Parks, a 42-year-old black seamstress, refused to give up her seat on the bus to a white man, because the rule was then that Negroes sat in the back of the buses. That's where they had to sit. And even if they sat in the back of the bus and a white person got on the bus, the white person had the right to make that person stand up so they could sit down. And she had had a long day, and she wasn't in the mood. And when the person told her that she needed to stand up and give that person her seat, she said no. And because of the law, and there were laws of segregation in Montgomery, because she broke the law, which she did, technically, or not technically, she did, she was arrested, convicted, and fined $14, which is a sum of money in those days. So on December 1st, 1955, Rosa Parks, a 42-year-old black seamstress, refused to give up her bus seat. And here's a picture. I have a signed book at home, but I don't have a signed signature, but there's Rosa Parks. She refused to give up her bus seat to a white person, and as a result, she was arrested and charged and fined $14. Now, what was Dr. King doing at this time? He was the pastor at the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, and he didn't think that was right. So as a protest to the way Mrs. Parks was treated, Dr. King led black citizens of Montgomery on a bus boycott. Not a march, but a bus boycott. What's that mean? Don't get on the bus. Okay? And even though whites had more rights on buses than blacks, who were the majority of people that rode buses, public transportation? Blacks. And that boycott lasted 13 months. Black people and some white people refused to ride on Montgomery City buses. Said, we're not riding, which means we're not paying to ride. And it lasted 13 months. Well, on December 13th, 1956, the United States Supreme Court ruled that Alabama's state and local policies on segregation were unlawful. So the United States Supreme Court told Alabama that you cannot have laws that segregate against Negroes.